captioners. We have CART captioners and also ASL interpreters. And just want to say welcome again to everybody for the second session of the Teach Access Career Development Series. So a few more tech overviews. If you would like to turn on captions, it's very easy. Just hit the CC Live Transcript button in the bottom menu bar. I turn mine on. And once the presentation begins, we're going to spotlight and feature the presenters and also the sign language interpreter so that it'll be easy for everyone. Please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. That'll help everybody. And feel free to rename your Zoom name. We do want to know your name. We want to know what college, company, location, where you're from. So just click on those three dots and press rename, and you can put that information in. You can also put your pronouns. I know I did that. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We will be monitoring that, and feel free to send a message directly to any of us, the host, co-host, and we will read your question aloud. Just for orientation, I've got a blue background like a lot of our speakers. I have light skin, light hair, and a black outfit on. So without further ado, I am absolutely honored to introduce everybody to Jennifer Arango. She, for today's session, which is all about infusing accessibility into your career, she and her team are at Walmart. They're the e-commerce team, and this panelist, they have a range of expertise from design, engineering, and product management teams. You're going to hear the panelists share about their journey into accessibility. The panel will be led, as I said, by Jennifer Arango, Senior Accessibility Product Manager for Walmart. Jennifer's been in the accessibility world and industry for 5 years, and before that, she was working in the design field. In her current role, she partners with designers, engineers, product owners to ensure that Walmart's site and apps used by customers with disabilities and everybody are accessible to people with disabilities. Jennifer is passionate, and we appreciate that, about universal design and teaching others how to push beyond making experiences accessible by focusing on inclusive best practices and applying those to create experiences for everyone so everybody can participate regardless of ability. Jennifer, I'm turning it right on over to you. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for that introduction. And everybody, thank you for joining this panel. We're all super excited to be here to share a little bit about our journey and hopefully answer some of the questions that you submitted when you signed up for the session. And so I'm just going to briefly describe what I look like. So I am a Latina woman with a dark curly brown hair. Today it's pulled up in a bun. And then I also have rectangular glasses or frames. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here with you today. So to kick us off, we are going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and also provide a description of what they look like. And if you could keep it to maybe like a 60-second version of what your day-to-day looks like in your current role. So to start us off, we'll start with Gio.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hey, everyone. My name is Giovanni. I go by Gio. I'm a senior product manager on the accessibility team here at Walmart. A little bit about my role is I get to work with lots of cross-functional team, specifically on the product side. So I get to see what all the product managers are going to be shipping and all the initiatives and data that they get to work with. I work with designers, developers, and testers. My role in particular, I'm the engineering lead and testing lead. So I help support engineers and make sure they're coding things in an accessible manner. And I also help support our testers who are working on accessibility if they ever have technical questions. And my goal primarily at Walmart is to help ensure that we're programming with accessibility in mind. A little bit about myself. Visually, I'm a Mexican male with brown skin, brown eyes, and dark hair with a stubbly beard. I'm very excited to talk to you all today.
Awesome. Thank you, Gio. So next, let's go to Sherry.
Hi, good morning. My name is Sherry. I am a software engineer with Walmart Global Tech for the past 5 years. My pronouns are she, her. I am fair-skinned. I have brown eyes and medium long brown curly hair. I am very short at 5 feet tall, and today I am wearing a black top. So my title at Walmart is Software Engineer 3, which doesn't mean very much. More specifically, I am a front-end web developer working on our lists and registry team. So at walmart.com, people can create shopping lists and registries for baby or wedding. So kind of anywhere where a user can create a list, my team is working on developing those pages that that users interact with, and either visually or with assistive technology. And in my specific role, I've been gravitating more and more toward focusing on those users that require assistive technology. So some of the things I do in my day-to-day that not all of our engineers do routinely is pull code to test it locally before it's ever deployed to our website. I have a goal of trying to prevent issues as much as possible, as well as trying to correct issues that we do end up having on the website. And so my manager kind of refers to me as the accessibility police, and is in the process of actually formalizing this a little bit more for me in as part of one of my career goals.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry. Next up, we have Melody.
Hi everyone, I'm Melody. I'm the senior UX designer in Walmart. I'm originally from China. My pronoun is she, her. I have black and medium length hair, and I wear a brown color blazer today. And I'm based in Seattle. So if you are also in Seattle, feel free to reach out. So my typical day in Walmart is like 70% of time. I will work alone on my design. And then another 30% of the time will be kind of different types of meetings. So it might be some like internal design reviews, or some design reviews with my like stakeholders, like my business partners, my PM, and my developers. And also, like we will have some collaboration time with my design teammates, and I will have like one-on-one with my managers to talk about like future career growth. Also, we have like different types of office hours that you can reach out whenever you have a question. Like we have accessibility office hour, we have design system, and we also have like content system, like content strategy. So like whenever you have the questions, we always have the right team to support. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my role and my day. So my primary product is working for the Walmart store socials. It's like the internal tool, and we are working on to combine like 100+ work tools into one app. So it's pretty kind of powerful tool for store socials. Yeah, that's
Great.
pretty much.
Thanks, Melody. All right, so we're gonna move it on to Wale. If you could introduce yourself and just share a 60-second version of what your typical day is like at Walmart.
All right. Hi, everyone. I just want to make sure my video is good. I'm in the frame.
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Wale Sabri. You can call me Wally or Wale. My pronouns are he/him. I'm the staff product management for Associate Accessibility. I'm a product manager. And my image description is as follows. I'm a Middle Eastern man in my mid-30s with olive skin, brownish, hazelish eyes, long, dark, curly hair that I was calling quarantine or pandemic hair, but I was just an excuse. I really wanted long hair, and it's tied up in a ponytail. And I'm currently just sitting in my living room wearing a long sleeve button-up shirt and my typical white Apple headphones. I also identify as blind, and I am on the product accessibility team with Jennifer and Gio. I'm quite new, but I also have about 7 years of working in city government in digital accessibility. Similarly to what Jennifer and Gio do, I interact with, product owners, developers, designers, and try to put accessibility requirements on their roadmap to ensure accessibility. So my day-to-day could be, doing emails, holding office hours, conducting trainings, or even doing design reviews. Yeah, so happy to be here and excited to talk to y'all.
All right, thank you, Ale, and thanks everybody for those great introductions. So now that we've heard a little bit about what you're doing today at Walmart and your day-to-day, I'd like us now to share more about your career journey. So how did you get to where you are today? So to start us off this time, I am gonna go first with Melody.
Yeah, my career path is pretty straightforward since Walmart is my first job. So I had my Master of Industrial Design at RISD, Road Airline School of Design. And I realized like I'm really into the design process, like design thinking process, but I don't like making models at all. So that's why I decided to change my gear to UX design after graduation. And I first joined Walmart international team, so design for international markets. I was there for like 1.5 years. And then I feel like I want to do something new. So I changed my team to this new team. And that's when I start to kind of know more about what is accessibility. Because I think it's super important. It's not only about like this page looks great, it looks clean. It's more about like making a digital product accessible to everybody. Yeah, so that's when I start to reach out to Jennifer for like to be my mentor and then to teach more about like accessibility knowledge. And we are also kind of start to working on some like accessibility training to all my team members. And that's how I get this awesome opportunity to speak with you all today.
Awesome. Thank you, Melody. And when you said about the importance of getting or finding a mentor, can you speak a little bit about what that process was like for you, and just more about like your passion for accessibility, and where that almost comes from and how important it was for you to find a mentor?
Yeah, I think I start to realize the importance of accessibility after I start to show my work in accessibility office hours, because like I think our design should not only make sense for like people maybe like who is like able, but also like for some screen readers and for some people, we all have the encounter the use case that we might have some cognitive disabilities. So our design should really fit into all the different use cases. So that's why I start to get more interested in this accessibility. And I think the difference between like working in the company versus starting the school is that like in school, if you sign up for a class and you got the professor who is the expert, but in company, if you are interested in something, you have to reach out by yourself and to throw yourself into the environment where you can be around with all the experts. Yeah, so that's why I just like reach out and message Jennifer and then join this awesome team so I can start to gather more accessibility knowledge.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melody, for sharing. All right, so next up, we'll go to Wale. If you can share a little bit about your career journey and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So I would say I didn't have the most typical career journey, but I think some folks will maybe relate to this. I got my undergrad in psychology and literature, and I was interested in studying disability. And luckily enough, I found a graduate school that had a disability studies major. In that school, I learned all about how disability fits or doesn't fit into society, and all about the disability rights movement, the psychology of disability, disability in the family, disability in education. laws, right? Just a holistic view of how disability was portrayed in our society, and where the disability rights movement is coming from, and what changes need to happen, right? And through that process, I discovered accessibility and the power it has, right, to give people with disabilities, enable them to use technology or travel or get a job or get an education. So I was moving from this way of thinking about my disability and disability at large as being a barrier, and thinking about accessibility as a way of empowering myself. And I also discovered iPhones. At 2009, the first iPhone was accessible. I started teaching blind people how to use iPhones and Macs. I got my master's in disability studies in 2012. And from there, I was trying to get work. I was going for internships, volunteer opportunities, community organizing. I did a lot of free work for a few years before I got a part-time job. And eventually in 2015, I started working at the New York City Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities, where it was a great experience because I got to practice what I was learning at school, right? All about inclusion and independence and advocacy, and giving people with disabilities access to live in the community and be independent, right? And be a part of that community. So I started working in housing, but I quickly transitioned to digital accessibility in 2016. And from there, I learned all about the WCAG standards, and I got to write reports, do testing, auditing, work with designers, work with developers. Eventually I ended up at Walmart here.
Great, thanks, Wale. So I was wondering if you could share for the group what your personal journey has been like navigating your career with a disability.
Absolutely. It was both, there's pros and cons. So definitely early on in my career, where I wasn't very confident in my disability identity, I went a lot for interviews. That period I mentioned at 2012 after I graduated, I went to a lot of interviews, and sometimes I would get positive feedback, and folks would tell me, "We love you. You just don't have enough experience," right? So there was always an easy way for folks to just have an out because they don't want to hire me for my disability. There's always, you don't have enough experience, or we're looking for this characteristic. The more I practiced, the more I had experience, and also the better I knew my rights. In terms of, they're not allowed to ask me about my disability at an interview, right? And it's my choice to disclose. And at first I wasn't disclosing, I was showing up and, surprising them with my disability, my white cane, or I have different colored canes, it could be black or blue, right? And that just provides for an awkward interaction, right? So I did start identifying myself as disabled, either in my cover letters or in my emails, requesting accommodations for the interview. These are things that are going to help you shine as a candidate with a disability, because if you know what you need, right, that's going to help the employer or potential employer be more comfortable in accepting you and knowing what they need to do, right? You kind of need to lead this process by letting folks know what you need, because nobody's going to think of that on your behalf. If there's something that's not working for you, that's something you need to tell folks about, right? And it requests some kind of accommodation. So as a blind person, I need screen reader technology. So that's something I'm going to need as an accommodation when I start working there. I might need access to print materials, right? I might need assistance filling out forms. I might need assistance navigating to the interview if it's in person when I get to the building, right? So those are things that aren't going to solve themselves unless I'm proactive about addressing them. And so some folks are scared to be flagged for a disability when they apply for jobs. And in my opinion, if an employer sees that you have a disability and moves on or doesn't reach out to you and discriminates against you, you don't want to work for that employer anyway, right? So it's sort of could be a positive thing as well. So yeah, so that's a little bit about my experience with
Awesome.
navigating
Thanks,
career.
Wale, for sharing that, personal journey. It's really great to hear. As I know some folks on that wanted to sign up for our panel were really interested in hearing more about what it's like to navigate a career with a disability. All right, so now we're going to turn it over to Sherry. If you could tell us about how you got here today.
Well, I've had kind of a meandering career journey. And when I think about the things I do today, I didn't even know what accessibility was 5 years ago when I first started at Walmart. And it's become so much a part of my day-to-day now. So I've been a software engineer since 2009, but this is a second career for me. I was originally a data analyst, and I started automating parts of my own work, learning about programming kind of on the side. So I started out initially as self-taught and then was eventually encouraged to go back to school for this. So I do have a 4-year degree in this field, which took me 6 years to get because I was working full-time and raising kids. And but I was very much on the back end side of things for a long while, working primarily in databases, but always very interested in gravitating toward the front end. And Walmart was my first full-time front end role. And when I first started learning about accessibility, I was absolutely bewildered. And one of the things that you're supposed to be good at as a software engineer is reading documentation. And I would look at, as I started to get into the official, specs for accessibility, not knowing how to interpret what I was looking at, and things about design patterns and ARIA labels and et cetera, and just had no idea. But it did feel like I have always in every role like to take ownership of something, and I gravitated toward accessibility. It kind of fascinated me. I do not have what's considered a disability at this time, but I do have vision problems that made me very interested in those technologies and figuring out how they worked. And it also felt like something that to that inclusiveness, to be able to make a site accessible to everybody really appealed to me. And so I just started diving in, and little by little, I remember my first year at Walmart, I volunteered to be on a special project we were having at the time to kind of clean up areas of our website that were not accessible, and each team needed a representative, and I volunteered to be that representative, and started challenging myself to solve more and more difficult problems from a development perspective to fix our accessibility issues, and started learning more and more. And Jennifer has been a mentor to me. Gio has been a mentor to me. And so I feel like I, am still gravitating toward where I want to be in my career. But I definitely feel like I'm on the path that I want to be on at this time.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. And so you mentioned something super important about learning about accessibility, not really knowing really anything, 5 years ago, right? And so how has learning about accessibility enhanced your career, and how has it helped your career growth?
The main thing it's done for me is it has it's given me something to really focus on. Software engineering is it's a very wide, it's a broad field. And as I mentioned, it kind of found me. I started doing things that related. I was encouraged. It seemed like a natural step for me. I never thought, I think as growing up, this was not a path I expected to be on. So I really did not start out with this particular, idea of where I wanted to go. And so I kind of dealt with whatever opportunities I was presented with at that time. And at my first role as a software engineer, I was actually already working for the company, and kind of just shifted, if from one team to the next. So this really gave me like a career direction, and because I do feel so passionate about it. And I think anything that you're passionate about, you're going to become good at. And so I feel like for the first time, I am really, really enjoying what, not that I haven't before. I've always gotten satisfaction over solving software engineering problems, but this gives me a more personal satisfaction that, I feel is something exceptional, something that everybody should hopefully have in their career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that feeling like empowered, and even that your work is making a difference, right, is super critical. Thanks, Sherry, for sharing that. All right, Gio, over to you to share about your career journey.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for sharing. Sherry, I relate very much to your story as well. But I'll go ahead and start with my accessibility journey. So I fell into accessibility really by accident. Back in 2016, I landed my first programming job working on building medical and dental websites. And one day in 2016, like hundreds of our clients just suddenly got like this email saying like, hey, we're suing you because your websites are inaccessible. And in the small startup that I was working on, no one really knew about accessibility. So they essentially put me as the lead to just go figure out what accessibility is. And so I got the opportunity to spend 3 months just learning about accessibility. And it was in this time that I got the opportunity to bring in people with disabilities to do usability testing. And it was this time where I met my first, like one of the first people with disabilities who was blind. And I got the opportunity to see like what a screen reader was. And the person in particular like taught me like how fast a screen reader could talk, really tell me the impact of like, hey, I want to be able to fill out like my medical insurance and my dental insurance without having to let someone know like what my social security is, or like my HIPAA compliance information. Just seeing the impact that the independence of making the product accessible would be really stuck with me. And so fast forward 2 years later, I landed another programming job, but I continued learning about accessibility just throughout that one experience. I would go and take accessibility courses on my free time. I would go to WebAIM and do like accessibility training, start doing certification, just like with my own money, my own time. I would do that all on the side. And just I continued learning until eventually one day a recruiter reached out and told me like, hey, there's an accessibility job for you. We like your resume. And around that time, I was really surprised because I generally didn't know there were accessibility jobs out there. I was under the belief that I needed to be one of the people to like talk about accessibility. Like I went out and started my own like accessibility company. I started webaccessibility.org and I started freelancing accessible websites. But I was generally super surprised to hear like, hey, there were actually accessibility jobs. So I was a little ignorant in that aspect, but I eventually took that job and I became an accessibility consultant, working with lots of different companies and ensuring those companies are making accessible products. And as I continue learning about accessibility and continue contributing to the community, I eventually found myself making my way to Walmart and switching to product management in the field of accessibility.
Awesome, great. Thanks for sharing that, Gio. So, you started out as a developer. So what exactly made you decide to transition fully into an accessibility SME role?
Yeah, with me switching to accessibility, I'd say definitely that impact that I first got in 2016 when I got to see the impact of accessibility. And as I continued switching between programming jobs, I was always advocating for accessibility. And actually, accessibility helped me get those jobs. But I noticed as I was building websites and like learning programming languages that I was working on all these projects, but the customers who were coming to the startup I was working for, they didn't have the budget for accessibility. And I knew in my gut, like I needed to make accessible products. Like it just felt like what I wanted to do. But there was always some issue. Like there wasn't enough time for accessibility. There wasn't enough budget for accessibility. There was always like a reason why we couldn't do it. But I knew I really wanted to do it. And so I realized it just felt like the wrong thing to do. And I just wanted to really spend all my time making things accessible. And so due to that lack of funding, like all the lack of like problems that just prevented me from being able to do it, I would have to do it on my like free time, like without any like sort of financial implications, just it's all on my own. That I really wanted to find a role that just let me do accessibility all the time because I was just so passionate about it. So that would
Yeah.
probably be the biggest reason why I decided to switch exclusively to an accessibility related role.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I could totally relate to that. So I know earlier you all heard that I started out in design as well before transitioning into accessibility. And similar to Sherry, I almost sort of like stumbled into accessibility, didn't really know what it was. And at that time, I was working as a graphic web designer and really wanted to find more meaning and purpose behind the work that I was doing. And there, I happened to stumble upon an accessibility posting. It had a lot of like technical requirements that I wasn't at the time someone that was able to test or perform a lot of the accessibility like role specific duties. However, the employer saw something in me, was going to really train me up to uh, be able to audit websites, be familiar with the WCAG guidelines. And it was really that at that kind of point where I decided to just make the full transition. I actually didn't know at the time that, you know, a lot of the design skills were going to transfer into accessibility. It just had to do with like not being really aware of or familiar as much with what accessibility was. And so almost at that time, I was almost saying like, okay, it was great to be a designer. I don't think I'll use that skill set moving into this role. But it was really, for me at least, a happy surprise that a lot of the skills that I had as a designer really transitioned nicely. And especially now with the work that I do with designers in the organization to really, focus around what does it mean to build something from a design lens with inclusive design so that we're able to shift that accessibility left into design and ensure that from a design, the design itself is born accessible. So that's just a little bit about my journey. And perhaps if I would have known more about accessibility, I would have considered staying in design, similar to Melody, right? She's a designer that works in design and is able to enhance her career with accessibility and mentorship that she's been receiving. So awesome. Well, thanks everybody for sharing about your career journey. I'm going to switch it over to another topic. And so I'd like to hear from you all on if, say, someone wanted a job like yours in engineering, as a designer, or as an accessibility SME, what advice would you give them to help them prepare? And especially like if you could talk about like what skills are essential for your career, either hard or soft skills. So let's start it off this time with Wale.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I talked about like, navigating my career with a disability. And one thing I forgot to talk about is that it's a positive, or it could be a positive when you're working in the field of access or accessibility. Having a disability gives you an edge because you have, or I have, the lived experience. I'm a full-time screen reader user. I'm an end user in many cases, right? I don't represent all people with disabilities, but I represent at least folks like myself. So that is something to keep in mind, if you are a person with a disability, you can use that to your advantage when you are trying to navigate this career. The other thing is, there's also a trend of people with disabilities that go for accessibility jobs just because they're disabled. I would say, you also need to have the skills, right? And the knowledge, and the education, if possible. So there are certifications out there, the CPACC and the WAS. I want to say what the acronyms stand for. I know Web Accessibility Specialist. The CPACC is a little bit longer, but it is an accessibility certification that's out there. Perhaps Jennifer or Gio could elaborate more on those, or at least what they stand for. Those are good to have if you're new. I actually did have the chance of sort of starting this career at a relatively beginner level. And I got to learn on the job when I was in the city of New York, just by, encountering the next inaccessible thing, whether it was a map that wasn't accessible, or a vaccine finder that wasn't accessible, or applying for benefits, or just getting information about COVID and data visualization. So, over this 7 years that I was there, I got to slowly, take on these problems that helped me get familiar with this field. The other thing, the final thing I'm going to say is, know the standards, right? The web content accessibility guidelines are very good at helping you advocate for your needs, as an employee, as a customer, as a disabled person, as an ally. If you can cite the different points, right, from the WCAG, it's a lot harder to argue with you whether this, is whether changing something for accessibility is a good thing or a bad thing, right? We all know that we have to comply with these guidelines, right? And so the better you are at expressing them and referring to them, the better your advocacy will, and the more convincing you will be when it's time to talk to designers and developers to make things more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for sharing that point about lived experience, Wale. I think that's super important. And I know that there's been multiple times when myself and Gio have come to you, and we come with almost like, hey, here's an understanding of what we think is the best solution, but you offering that perspective with lived experience and being able to just validate what our educated guess is, has been super helpful in helping us really create products and experiences that not only are just technically accessible, but are also usable and in practice can be used by people with disabilities. So I'll turn it over next to Gio for any advice you have for someone that wants an SME specific role.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I'd say there's a few things I would do if someone who wanted to get into like being an accessibility like SME, so subject matter expert, or just accessibility in product or a tester. The first thing I would definitely recommend is just start testing and start learning about accessibility. Accessibility is one of those topics that's like super broad, and it's like vague in a way, but for a reason. Like the ADA is very progressive because it's always going to be growing and changing. So you could learn about accessibility gaming. There's accessibility VR. Maybe you're interested in document accessibility. There's so many aspects of accessibility that you could get into. So I would say just start learning about accessibility. There's so many screen readers out there. There's so many different types of assistive technologies. Like learn to use all three different types of screen readers. I would say just start learning and making sure you're just encompassing that like lifelong learner aspect of accessibility. And the second aspect I would say is that definitely get a certification like Wale was mentioning. I do have 2 certifications. I have my CPAC, the Certified Professional in Accessibility Core Competencies. I have my WAS certification. There's so many different certifications as well. There's a document accessibility certification. There's the trusted tester from the government. There's even gaming accessibility certification. Whenever I see someone with one of those certifications, I tend to trust them a little bit more and just know that they'll provide a little bit more technical and accurate answers because they have a certification. And if I'm hiring, I'll definitely be looking for those types of certifications. The third aspect I would say is definitely be a living and breathing example of accessibility. So I expect if you're talking about accessibility and advocating for accessibility, that you also actually contribute to accessibility. So if you're posting on social media, make sure you're posting alt text, or if you're putting YouTube videos out there, add transcripts and captions. Just make sure whatever you're doing is accessible if you're advocating for it. And then the fourth aspect I'd recommend is definitely work on a portfolio. It always helps. And the fifth one would be like more of a secret sauce, but I knew accessibility and I was testing accessibility. But there was one day where I just got the opportunity to test in multiple design systems for different companies. I would definitely recommend, if you're already testing or already in accessibility, and go look at different design systems to see how companies are developing accessible components. Like, I've gotten the chance to work on an accessible date picker, and it's really complex to work on those components, like how a person would make a date picker or date calendar accessible. So I would recommend go test out those design systems and design libraries, even the ARIA design patterns library, and go see how it works, like what a combo box component's for, what's a list box component's for, just because there's so many reasons why a specific feature was designed in a specific way. You just get a lot of knowledge if you become familiar with those patterns, because that's one thing that I was always confused on. So I recommend, if you have the chance, definitely go test out different design systems, and that'll just teach you like the different terminologies, the different specs that are needed. Those are just like some tricks I would recommend.
Awesome. Thanks, Gio. And the one of the certifications that you mentioned, Trusted Testers, that actually is a free certification. I know some of these other ones do cost. So if you are interested in that, I highly recommend it, especially if you want to build more of those like technical chops. All right. So next up is we'll go over to Melody to share what advice you have.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. So I asked the manager who hired me into Walmart, like, why you choose me? And he said something like, I'm looking for a nice and smart person. I'm not sure about the smart part, but I'm definitely a nice person. I think when he says smart, it speaks to like the hard skills that are required in this designer role. So you have to prepare like a solid portfolio to show your strong design skills. And my advice on this part would be like, in your portfolio, like the process is more important than the result, because I noticed a lot of students talk a lot about like what they finally did for their projects. So I'm thinking like spend less time on the results, but talk more about like how you get to the end point. How do you make the design decision throughout your process? That is more important. And also like, especially when you look at the design process, like from research to like wireframing to like UI to animation, and which part are you particularly good at? I think this also assigned to apply to your like accessibility related projects, like try to show off your strength from your projects. And also like in terms of the soft skills, like try to be nice, be curious, like be open-minded and be collaborative, especially like if you want to work for like a big company, because as a designer, you have to work with cross-functional teams, and you need to be comfortable to like talk to different stakeholders when you make a design decision, and always open for feedback. So I think overall, I like what my manager said. It's a good reminder for myself, like try to be a nice and smart person.
Awesome. No, thanks, Melody, for sharing. I think that what you touched on, especially the communication piece and knowing your audience, whether you're working with designers, product owners, engineers, sometimes it's almost like learning to speak different languages depending on the person that or audience that you're addressing. So awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Sherry, over to you.
Okay, so as far as like becoming a software engineer to begin with, I think that there's many different paths, and I think that the one that works for the individual is the best. I myself do have a 4-year degree in this field. I have worked with people who were self-taught, which is how I did start. I have worked with people who have been to various different boot camps, and yeah, there's advantages and disadvantages, I think, to each. So I think anyone who wants to pursue this career, you definitely do need the technical skills. and how you acquire them, I feel is a little less important because each are going to have advantages and disadvantages. The main thing is, do they work with your lifestyle and your what's going on in your world currently to be able to get through and acquire those technical skills. So outside of that, I almost feel like what I think consider soft skills are a little bit almost more important. I think anyone going into this field needs to be comfortable with constant learning, because the world of technology just never, it does not pause. And also needs to be a good communicator. As Melody mentioned, software engineers, we work a great deal with other teammates, with other teams. Being able to be a good communicator is very important, and being a problem solver, being someone who just wants to get the problem fixed. And so I think all of those skills are needed. And then as far as becoming becoming someone who has my particular focus on accessibility, I am myself working, however slowly, toward my my WAS, my Web Accessibility Specialist certification. I know that there are others. As a developer, I think that one is the most beneficial to me to begin with. And then it's just, I think, awareness. So many developers, front end developers, the focus always, generally gravitates toward the visual. We are expected, all of us are expected to match pixel perfect designs for the visual user. And all of us are also expected to keep our site accessible. But I think for most front end developers, their first thought is the visual aspect and how things look. So in my own, my own journey, I find at this point, I don't even look at the visual design. I don't even try to match the visual design until I feel that I've achieved accessibility in any new features that I develop. And I always test accessibility first before I test with a keyboard or mouse trackpad. So those are some of the things that that I do to keep my focus on accessibility as a front-end software engineer. That I think, if you were going to have that focus, you would want to be doing those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's wonderful to hear, Sherry, that that's your approach. I think, especially starting out with accessibility, focusing on making it accessible first is really a great foundation to then sprinkle in, like, what is this going to look like? How do I change it to match the design? So awesome to hear that. That's why you're one of the accessibility champions. All right, well, we look at the time. We only have 8 minutes left. And so I want us to now, I know there's a few questions in the chat, so take some time for questions that you, the audience, may have. I know there's 2 already in the chat, so let me read the first one, and if anyone wants to take it, just let me know. So the first one is from Roshan. I have rarely heard about the concept of office hours outside of academia, especially in the corporate world. I am curious to know how your staff/peers utilizes those times and how popular they are. What are the typical questions you get or discussions you have about accessibility? Does anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I could go in first. So I do lead developer office hours here at Walmart, and I do have lots of people who come in, but sometimes it's a little difficult to get people to come in. Walmart's so vast because we have people from India, and it could be completely nighttime when it's my morning time, people all over the world. That's one of the issues I run into there. But I'd say I get questions from accessibility implementations. We do have designers get accessibility annotations for their designs. So some developers might bring annotation questions on asking hey, what is this ARIA Live? How do you implement something like this? And so I spend a lot of time, whether it's supporting on someone asking like mobile accessibility questions using like Swift and native solutions with like voice over talkback. I spent a lot of time talking about implementations. I might also spend some of that time helping people debug bugs. So an accessibility tester might flag a bug and they'll give it to a developer to fix. The developer might not know how to fix that accessibility bug, so I'll spend some time debugging that bug and letting them know like how I would recommend fixing that issue, just explaining bugs. So I do end up just supporting different types of teams. I also support testers. Sometimes testers sneak in there as well. So I do end up supporting people when I can consistently on my office hours are Wednesdays. That's my experience leading dev office hours.
Awesome. Thanks, Gio. And from the design side, we review designs as well. And just there's a lot of questions about interaction. Color contrast comes up too. And so those are just like some of the topics that come up from a design perspective, but a lot of it is based on interaction and if that certain interaction will also be accessible with assistive technology. All right, so the next question we have, oh, it looks like someone has their hand raised. Ahmed, is that how you pronounce your name? If you can unmute yourself, and I think you're gonna ask a question.
Yeah, I'm Ahmed. You just hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So, actually, my question is a little vague because maybe like for me as a fresh grad translator, I still have a vague desire regarding my career journey because we know that um, we have things called CAT tools, but they're inaccessible and they are for sure demanded in the translation work world. That's why I had the idea of trying to move into like a different field, say, for example, any other technical field. So um, I don't know. I don't know what I should do now. I'm in a programming course. I'm still at the beginner level. I started it about 2 months ago, but I don't know how I can like make this idea of deciding to move on to another field materialize into reality. There's a lot of vagueness here, so can you please give me like some clarification, some indications? Because
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would definitely recommend just what we've been hearing throughout is doing a lot of like research into accessibility, such a broad umbrella. And so trying to figure out like what would your focus area be, whether it's design, development, or even more of a product-based role. So there are a lot of great resources out there, a lot of the certifications. I would say if you're really, really interested in accessibility, getting one of those certifications would really help you stand out as a candidate when you are going to interviews. There's also a lot of like conferences as well that you can attend. Some of them, like for example, AxCon is free, it's remote. So it's a lot of there's a lot of ways to like get to know what some of the folks in accessibility are presenting. There's a lot of companies that present too. So that would be a really great way to start also like networking as well. And if you're ever able to attend like a conference in person, that would also be like my recommendation is to also start networking and really realizing, what are building those relationships with people in the industry. You'll find that a lot of people, like especially once you reach out over LinkedIn, everybody's super welcoming. And so if you're, curious a little bit more about just, how to just finalize more or get more concrete steps into landing a job, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I could share a little bit more about like the strategies that I personally use to land my first job as well. And yeah, provide more additional resources if that's what you're looking for. Hopefully that helps.
And if I can add as well, some smaller ways that you can get started. There's some good volunteer opportunities where you could give to the community while learning. So there's a website called youdescribe.org where it shows you and teaches you how to add audio descriptions to videos, and then you can volunteer to add descriptions to YouTube videos on youdescribe.org. There's also Be My Eyes. It's an app that you can have on your phone where a blind person can call you using video, and you could volunteer to just help them with everyday tasks. So just wanted to put some stuff out there in terms of just being more involved, volunteering in the community, seeing if that's something that you want to do. You can even volunteer for captioning services, that kind of stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, those are also great opportunities. Well, I thank you for sharing. I know we're at time, so thank you all again for joining the session. If you have more questions, you could link or reach out to us on LinkedIn. We could continue the conversation, and I'll turn it over back to Teach Access folks.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Mindy, and I am the development director at Teach Access. I want to thank you all for joining us. This has been by far fantastic, hands down. Walmart team, you are all rock stars and really gave some amazing information. I've already sent you all LinkedIn requests. So thank you everyone for attending. We are recording this session. You will get a copy of the recording. Just want to remind you, next week, we will have 2 disability advocacy organizations joining us. We'll have careers in UX and accessibility with World Institute on Disability, and then building accessibility talent with American Foundation for the Blind. So we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us. Any other questions, feel free to reach out, and we will look forward to seeing everyone next week.
All right, awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye.